Hi, welcome to episode 1 of Cracking the Codex for Dark Angels. John, you've been a Dark Angels player for quite a while, and I've got to say they are my favourite of all the chapters, thematically at least. How are you feeling about this new release?
I am curious because there
Mm,
was a lot of naysaying initially from the reviews. Everyone's going, "Oh, the sky is falling, Deathwing Knights, let's throw them in the bin." But I'm quite jazzed. I'm
yeah,
not going to lie. It means that you're not going right. I've got to take Deathwing Knights, and then what am I spending my other 1,600 points on? Instead, I'm like, I've got 2,000 points. What do I
yeah,
spend them
yeah,
on?
that's true.
And which
Um,
detachment? I'm spoiled.
it is a little bit of a shame because the play style that a lot of Deathwing players have enjoyed is now objectively worse and not necessarily supported by the detachments that we've got here. But there's a new puzzle to crack, and I think that's interesting. I always like
Yes.
building around new detachments, new sets of rules. So we have got the Inner Circle Task Force to start with. For those of you at home who don't know what that is the Deathwing detachment, basically, the first company. So in this detachment, in fact, before we get into that detachment, we should probably say, um, first of all Space Marines, Oath of Moment. This is the rule that you've probably seen a million times before, but just to clarify in case you haven't, start of your command phase, you select one of your opponent's units, and until your next command phase, so this is your turn and your opponent's turn, so it's key if they charge you, for example. And each time a model with this ability, which is basically all Marine units, each time they make an attack against the oathed target unit, they reroll all of their hits. Nice for some consistency. Was very good when it was reroll wounds as well. Now it's just hits, but this detachment does go away to bridge that gap because it does
Yeah.
have ways to improve your wound rolls, which is very important. We have also got, moving on. Secondly, we've got the Unforgiven keyword here. This is a quick one. Basically, just means that you can't run multiple characters from multiple chapters. If you're running Dark Angels units, that does lock you into just running Dark Angels. You can't have Death Company and Deathwing in the same list, for example.
Shame.
That would be pretty good, actually. We've also got quickly the Raven Wing. So Raven Wing is all your mounted and vehicle units that can fly. Just good to have. Obviously, keys off more for the detachment we might be looking at next week. And then important for this one, the Deathwing. So the Deathwing here are units that have the Terminator keyword, Blade Guard units, Stern Guard veterans, and Vanguard veterans. But then also a number of tanks. You've got all the Land Raiders and both the Repulsors, and then your Dreadnoughts as well. This is a wide selection, and it's mostly infantry that this matters for, but there is one stratagem that you pointed out to me just a few moments ago where there is some interesting jank you can do with this.
Yes.
But we'll get onto that in a second. So, in this detachment, Inner Circle Task Force, what do you get? Effectively, in your command phase, not only do you pick one Oath of Moment target to get reroll hits against, you also choose one Vowed target, which is an objective marker. Until the start of your next command phase, that objective marker is vowed, and each time a Deathwing infantry unit makes an attack that targets a unit within range, so if you're playing with the objective mats on the mat, if you're playing with markers within 3 inches of that marker, you add one to the wound roll. This is pretty strong, I would say.
Yeah.
Plus one to wound is a fairly large buff at efficiency. It doesn't affect vehicles, so those dreadnoughts and the land raiders don't get any buff against it. But it doesn't say melee,
No. What
which
makes
is
this
big.
and what makes it really interesting is a unit becomes Deathwing infantry if it is either Terminator or led by a Deathwing character.
Deathwing, are there any of those that might be good to go in perhaps a shooting unit?
All the named characters.
Yeah, and there's one that's specifically, I think, better than all of the rest, which we
Yeah.
will again get onto. But yeah, no, it opens up some shooting. Azrael is basically the one that you want to put in a brick of something valuable. For example, Hellblasters.
Yeah.
He gives them a 4-up invuln. He also gives them sustained hits 1, and he gives them the Deathwing keyword. So if they're shooting at the unit that's on the vowed target, they are also +1 to wound, which is very nice. It also lets you key some strats off them in this detachment as well. So not only have we got those, we've got some decent enhancements in this detachment as well. First one's a little bit of a miss for me. I don't particularly care about it, but I'd probably pick it up if I had 15 points spare and I wanted to make a bit of a beater. You put it on one of your Deathwing models, and your melee weapons get lethal hits. And if you're attacking something on the Vowed objective marker, you get critical hits on a 5+. Stacks well with your Oath of Moment, rerolling those hits. If you fish for them, you get 55% of your hits as lethal hits. It's fine. If this was lethal hits on the squad, or increasing, the critical hit range on the squad on the Vowed target, I'd be a lot more excited, but
Yeah.
it's just, buff up one character to be a little bit better, which I'm not super excited about. Next of all, we've got Singular Will. This is, again, Deathwing model only, and each time a bearer's unit piles in on consolidates, model in that unit can move an additional 3 inches. Now, this is big. This is really good.
Very
This
good.
takes you from maybe getting, 4 models onto the objective and struggling to beat your opponent in OC. Suddenly, you can get up to 12 inches of movement. Obviously, the fight phase is more restrictive in terms of movement than it used to be, but there's still a lot of tricks that people are now working out how to use, and having that extra 3 inches of movement really does help. And before you might not have been able to pile in at all. Now, if you end your fight phase 5 inches away from an objective marker, suddenly you can pile onto it where you wouldn't have been able to move at all before, which is
Yeah.
very big. All right, moving on, we've got the Deathwing Assault. Deathwing model with the deep strike ability only. Realistically, that's all of them, apart from Azrael, I guess.
Yeah, it's mostly the Terminator guys, I think it ends up being as a result.
Whenever I think Deathwing, I do think
Yeah.
Terminators. That's
Yeah.
definitely where my mind goes. But what this allows is it lets you to use your deep strike in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase. So what that means is you can't rapid ingress on your opponent's turn 1, but you can deep strike in turn 1, potentially a brick of 10 assault Terminators, perhaps. Seems like a
Three
strong.
3.1 inches away would be the dream, perhaps. Maybe.
Yeah, you can absolutely spend a CP to get a really, really aggressive turn 1. If your opponent can't chew through Terminators, just being able to say turn 1, all right, hey, you know what? I've gone first. Turns out you're move blocked. Let's see you get out of this situation. Or using it more realistically, put them in a little pocket that's going to be difficult for your opponent to get
Right.
to, maybe behind a staging ruin or something like that. Is very nice to deliver a melee brick quite early. Obviously, you can also put it on a shooting brick and just shoot something as well. Finally, we've got Eye of the Unseen. This is an interesting one. I don't think I'm going to take this ever, because I think every Deathwing list I'm going to run has Azrael in. However, if for some reason you don't want to run Azrael, it gives you a chance to regen CP each time you use a stratagem on the unit. This is interesting because, well, obviously it gets better if you use it on the Vowed target, Vowed
Yeah.
objective. So it's normally a 5+. If your unit's on the Vowed objective, it's a 4+. You can use this with a captain in Terminator armor, who lets you use a stratagem for free on that unit once per battle round, and potentially regen CP even though you haven't spent any. Again, I'm just taking Azrael, but there is potentially some play there if you wanted to go
Yeah.
captain heavy. It's something. Like I say, I think you just get the free CP every turn from having Azrael. But if you don't want to go that way for whatever reason, this is definitely another way that you can get some additional CP into your lists. Stratagems. So the enhancements are solid, I would say. Some more than others, and then the stratagems as well, I think, are pretty good. I think something that's important to note here is there's no way of advancing and charging in this detachment, which is,
Yeah.
if we look at how the detachments that have done well typically play, it's usually the ones that have advance and charge. I think it's fine because there are a couple of tools in here that you can get around it. Turn 1 deep strike, one of the stratagems that we're going to talk about in a moment as well for a closer deep strike. But keep in mind that you don't really get any movement tricks in terms of getting closer to your enemy and hitting them in the face.
Boo.
So strategy, yeah, boo indeed. Stratagem wise, we're going to start off with Armor of Contempt. You know it, you love it. After your opponent has shot a fort into you, target you in the shooting or fight phase, you can spend a CP and reduce the AP of incoming attacks by 1. Great strat. This is the army that wants to be running Terminators, so very valuable on a 2-up save.
Yeah.
especially because it's so easy to get cover in 10th edition. You're realistically putting AP2 to AP0, which is just very difficult for your opponents to deal with. The second battle tactic we have is uh, Unmatched Fortitude. This is also a defensive strat as well, which is quite nice. I do like having the flexibility of my battle tactics being defensive strats.
Yeah.
It means that you're always ready to go. You can run 2 units defensively if you want to, 2 bricks of terminators with characters, for example. And what it does is Unmatched Fortitude. After your opponent has selected a target in the shooting phase, if they're selecting a Deathwing infantry unit and their strength is higher than your toughness, it's -1 to wound. Sounds a little bit convoluted, but basically what it does is if they're shooting you with stuff that's stronger than your toughness, -1 to wound, this is really valuable on taking 3s down to 4s. Sometimes you're going to use it on 2s down to 3s. Unfortunately, you can't, decrease their wound rolls to a 5. It has to be strength higher than toughness.
Yeah.
But especially if you combo it with Armor of Contempt, it just makes one unit very difficult to deal with in the shooting phase. All right, moving on, we've got Martial Mastery. In the fight phase, you select one of your Deathwing infantry units, and you get to reroll 1s to wound. This is fine. However, if you're within range of the Vowed objective marker, you can reroll the wound instead. This is incredible. Rerolling wounds was great when you had Oath of Moment, and now you don't have
Yes.
the buffed up Oath of Moment from the index. You just have a very strong ability tied to, being where you decided to be in your command phase.
Yeah.
If you can plan out your turns, I think this is a very strong ability.
Twin linked Thunderhammers sounds
Twin,
exciting to
yes.
me.
Yeah, let's just go straight to the meat of this. Twin Link Thunderhammers, because
Yeah.
rerolling wounds is good on any melee weapon. Just being able to increase your wounds is a valuable ability to have, especially if you're +1 wound. You can make even, lightning claws, for example, do a lot of
Yeah.
damage. Their ability to be twin linked makes a big difference to their output. But if you've got dev wounds, fishing for 6s suddenly becomes a lot easier to do.
Yeah.
Getting that consistency down is really nice. All right, moving on, we've got Duty Unto Death. This is a fairly typical fight on death. It's a 1 CP version, so you are fighting on death on a 4+ instead of automatically. But if you're stood on your Vowed objective marker, you add 1. So if you're fighting on death anywhere, it's a 4+. Fighting on death on your Vowed objective marker, it's a 3. I think this might be the best version of the strat
Yeah.
we've seen. It's just strictly better than all of the other 1 CP versions where
Yeah.
it's, a
And
4 up.
it's just a Deathwing unit as well. So this affects dreadnoughts. It affects units that are led by a Deathwing character.
Hmm.
So there is quite a bit of flexibility to it. I don't see
Yeah.
you going, "Oh, I'm going to fight on death with a dreadnought," but it might make a difference. There is fringe
Yeah.
cases, right?
There are definitely times where you've lost the game, but being able to punch back with the dreadnought that's definitely going to die, and if you clear the units that's taking, on
Exactly.
your objective, makes a big difference. So nice to have in the back pocket.
Yeah.
Typically going to be used on something like Terminators that are charged, but
Agreed.
you know, being able to have it in the back pocket and say, I'm just going to make my, Redemptor fight on death. Um, and Deathwing, this detachment is going to be more CP rich than other detachments because you're probably running Azrael because he has the Deathwing keyword and he
Yeah.
brings other bonuses and he gives you CP. So I really like this as a stratagem to have in your back pocket. Next up, we've got Relic Teleportarium. This is your movement phase, so key to note, you can't use this to rapid ingress in. It does have to be in your movement phase. 1 Deathwing unit, it doesn't specify, but that is unfortunately going to be Deathwing infantry, specifically your Terminators, because they're the only ones with deep strike. And you can set up the unit anywhere on the battlefield more than 3 inches away. You can't charge, but this is the fabled 3-inch deep strike that a lot of, say, the Vanguard detachment get. Um, really nice to be able to, on turn 1, for example, bring in the unit that has the enhancement that lets you deep strike on turn 1, and then deep strike 3 inches away, or get into a nice little pocket that your opponent's going to struggle to root you out of, set up behind a staging room that's very forwards, just string out in a line and say, what are you going to do about this? A lot of a use of that one there.
Yeah.
It's also nice now that we've had Inceptors be nerfed as well. They were the premium source of 3-inch deep strike for Marines getting into the back line. So I'm not saying you're necessarily going to use a 200 odd point of Terminators to do teleport homers in your opponent's backfield, but if the game does negate, does require that at some point, it gives you the option.
It doesn't even have to be a big unit. You could, for
Put a
example,
5-man in.
or just a character, a
That's
Deathwing
true.
character.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's necessarily sensible, but there is that choice that you go, right, I just need to boop someone down there and have that flexibility.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered using lone characters. You can have an ancient for fairly cheap.
55 points, I want to say.
It's low, so yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there is something there. Got to be careful not to lean into assassinate too much.
Yes, of
And
course.
getting back to the stratagems before we involve you in our list building process, we've finally got Wrath of the Lion. This is your charge phase. One Deathwing infantry unit from your army that just entered a charge move, and you roll a d6 for each model in the unit, and on a 4+, it is 1 mortal wound to your enemy, which is a 3+ if you're on the vowed objective marker. It is capped on 3 mortal wounds, however, so this is one of the worst versions of the strat that we've seen across the board, which is a little bit of a shame. I do like it though. Obviously, Catan are so hot right now, so being able to sprinkle in some extra mortal wounds on the charge, especially if you've got 10 Hammonators that you're charging into something, just being able to reliably put that extra sprinkling of damage onto your opponent is quite nice.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. So, stratagem's done. Let's talk about the list that we've got. This is, I think, quite an interesting basis. I'm keen to see how people develop the list if people do take it to tournaments. Obviously, Dark Angels do still have access to all of the base detachments, which are very established, very strong. Gladius is great, Stormlance is great, Vanguard is great, Firestorm is fairly solid as well. But I think this is a fairly solid way to start building a Dark Angels list in the, I was going to call it the first company, Detachment. We are using the points from the most recent release. This is before the Codex comes out officially. We haven't seen whether they're going to get changes from the points in the back of the Codex. We're working on the assumption that the ones in the MFM are correct. If needs be, we can update later on down the line. So, fairly sample. We've got Azrael, who's going to be sitting in with a brick of Hellblasters. This gives them the Deathwing keyword, which means that they will get the detachment bonus of +1 to wound when shooting anything on the vowed objective marker. It also gives them a 4-pin Vun, and he generates a CP as well. Yeah, and sustained its 1. That's what I was looking for.
Which is not just in shooting, it's just full stop.
That's true. Something to remember is Marines do just pick up chaff in combat, even if they don't have any melee weapons. You can just charge in, pick up some, light screening, or witches if you get the charge on them. I'm expecting to see more Drakari sometime soon. So maybe, you walk them up, pop some transports with your plasma, and then charge the soft, squishy insides and kill them, because turns out Marines just punch things reasonably well at base rate. Then we've got an Ancient in Terminator armor attached to the squad of Terminator Assault Marines. He has Deathwing Assault, which is the turn 1 deep strike. Very valuable there, being able to just turn 1, jam down 11 Terminators, or, more realistically, not put them down turn 1, but make your opponent play as if you will do that. This is the really terrifying thing.
Getting in their head.
Anytime you can do this sort of mind game with your opponent to make them play differently and upset their plans, it's very valuable. A lot of the time, holding them back is going to be more valuable, so you can see how your opponent plays and you can respond and find a little niche for the big unit to go into. Then we've got a captain with jump pack. They'll be joining one of the assault intercessors with jump packs. Just a great, cheap, mobile unit. Gets a little punchy. It's nice to have a unit that can do free battle tactics in Space Marines. Just having in there so you can, even if it's just a command reroll or Armor of Contempt to see them through, get some additional value is quite nice. Then we've got 2 Impulsors, and inside the Impulsors are a squad of 6 Blade Guard Veteran each. Blade Guard Veteran are Deathwing now. This is great. If you're charging in, one of the main weaknesses of them is they're only Strength 5. Getting into combat on the Vowed objective, getting, taking your wounding from 5s to 4s, for example, with the +1 to wound from the detachment bonus is great. Being able to reroll all the wounds is very nice for a CP as well. I think this is a detachment that really likes having Blade Guard in, and with Deathwing Knights going a bit of the way of the dodo, it opens up the play for other melee units to be seen as well. Then we've got the ever-present Scouts. Points-wise, I went with 3 just because they're a cheap, efficient unit to put in. They've gone up 10 points. They're still maybe too cheap. I'd probably be taking them at 75 or maybe even 80 points. They're so good. They're
Yeah, they're
so
great.
good. And we've also got a squad of Sternguard veterans to round it out. This is a 10-body unit of Sternguard, a couple of heavy bolters in there, otherwise just the regular Sternguard bolters as well. They have the Deathwing keyword, so you're automatically getting the bonus if you're shooting on the vowed objective.
Yeah.
Running this unit and the Hellblasters means that you can pick which problem you want to solve that's on an objective. You've got something to deal with infantry, you've got something to deal with vehicles and or tougher targets. You can even put, one or both squads in strat reserve. I'd be more tempted to start the Azrael Hellblaster Castle on the board, just so you're getting that CP early. But it gives you some flexibility depending on what you're playing against. What are your thoughts on this one, John?
So, a few interesting things to note. We've had, when using Terminators with the Terminator Assault Squad, they are now not part of the Deathwing Terminator Squad. So you don't benefit from their Deathwing ability, which is ignoring modifiers, and you don't get the Watcher in the Dark. So that is the one compromise now in the Codex, is you can't just go, I'm wanting my Terminators to be this type or this type, and it be that one data sheet.
Yeah.
It means in theory you can have 3 units of Terminator Assault Squad and then 3 units of Terminators if you wanted.
You
Don't
could
think you
even have
would.
3 additional squads of Deathwing,
Yeah.
if you really
So
wanted to.
it's giving you that choice,
Yeah.
but it's a slight kind of side upgrade, but I'm not too surprised
Yeah.
that they don't get all the toys.
Yeah, I think it's a shame. I think I'd call it a downgrade, but
Yeah,
in this detachment, I really want to be re-rolling wounds with my
I think
Devastators.
that's. And what I do find interesting is if you've got the Impulsor with the Blade Guard in,
Yeah.
if that Impulsor's spare,
Mm.
it could sit on an objective, be a right
Oh yeah.
pain for some OC. Also, if you're worried about Overwatch for whatever reason, if they've got some kind of scary Overwatch or they can Overwatch on greater than a 6-up, you just throw the Impulsor in. And then if you've
Yep.
got spare CP, some tank shock, baby. It's just like there's all these kind of little assets. So the assault intercessors bouncing around throwing grenades, hammer ratting people to soften up. But then you maybe throw your
Mm.
terminators in to actually do the damage. It's just like it's how
It-
Space Marines I feel should play.
Yeah, it feels like quite a flexible list in that regard. Obviously, the main thing I envision the Impulsors doing is teleport homers in the middle of the board, because that is how transports work in 10th edition
Yes.
at this point. But
The one unit I would like to try to squeeze in, which is a bit of a fringe case, is I would like to squeeze in 5 normal intercessors. Purely because at
interesting.
80 points, back objective, start the game, it is sticky. Like that flexibility, if all your stuff's going forwards,
Yeah.
that's where maybe a scout unit could be just sitting there. But if a scout unit's shot with, say, some no line of sight shooting, that objective's no longer held, so you have to put something on it. Whilst if it's sticky, it stays sticky
Yeah,
until they
I
take
think
it
if I
back.
if I want
Just nice.
a backfield holder, I think I'd rather have the infiltrators. Having that
Yeah,
12-inch no deep strike bubble is very nice if someone's playing,
yeah,
enemy Deathwing and or trying to deep strike a monolith in your home
yeah.
field. Just being able to screen
It's
that out
20
very
points
comfortably.
difference, I suppose, isn't it? So
Yeah,
depends if
it's
what you can squeeze in. So
yeah. I couldn't even squeeze in, regular
yeah,
intercessors in this list.
no, that was the thing. It
But
was like there's so many different ways you could tweak the list and not
mm,
make it a too different a list, and that's what I find
yep,
exciting about this kind of slight change and the detachments. Like even
yeah,
compared to some of the lesser exciting Space Marine detachments, this one I look at and go, there isn't just here's what you're going to take. There is
mm,
so many choices, which is it's quite interesting. Like suddenly I went, where are my Stern Guard? I've got 10 from Leviathan. Where the heck are they? And I was just fishing that stuff out. And I was like, Blade Guard are back on the menu. And it's exciting because it's stuff that I think most players will have already as well. So it's not a case of, great, I've got to buy the new hot stuff.
mm.
There's a little bit of kind of that excitement where you go, I get to bring out some toys and use them in a different way.
Yeah, especially since we're coming into a point where maybe you just won't see every list Space Marines running 6 to 12 aggressors. which is point of note. I think they're probably still quite good, but this
I think
detachment
so.
gives you reasons to run them. That aren't aggressors. Gives you
Yeah.
reason to run other units, which is nice.
That's one of the big holes in the Deathwing keyword is that you cannot add it to a Gravis unit, as far as I could figure out. Which is it's a slight shame, but also they're not Deathwing. Why would they?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I think final thoughts on this detachment. I'm competitively, I'm not 100% sold on it. I am quite interested to see how people do with it, though, and I think it's a more interestingly, it's more well-rounded. If you're willing to take very specific units, I think the playstyle can be a lot more well-rounded than some of the others. Because your damage buff are kind of agnostic to shooting and melee, which is nice. And the tools that you've got in here, while not advance and charge, it is still nice to have a 3-inch deep strike, which is
Yeah.
just good in general. Thank you for watching. This has been episode 1. Next week we will be talking about the Raven Wing detachment. Quite fast, interesting one to build lists around there. If you haven't subscribed, this is a great time to plug our Discord. Say you should subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more of these videos coming out. Drop us a like, leave a comment. We do read all the comments. Always interesting to hear people's opinions on the content we put out. And we will see you next week.